When did teenage shows become so damn sexual?
No!
In order to understand how we got to where we are today, aka the euphorification, Sydney Sweeney's boobs in my face time. Bless her, she's so hot. Anyway, we have to look back on the journey on how we got here in the first place. How teenage shows were originally just that. Teenage shows. I'm here to show you the difference between what was once sexual in a teenage show, what was considered scandalous back then, which doesn't even compare to what we got now. Doesn't even compare to the amount of ass cheek jizz everywhere. How did we get here? Who is to blame for all of this? Which show really sparked this all? Are people wanting to see more tits in their face or not? I don't know. Probably. Should we be letting this happen? That's another question. I'm going to talk about North American teenage dramas more so. And I want you guys to keep that in mind because this will be relevant. But I wanted to take it back to early 2000s with prime example TV shows such as The OC and One Tree Hill. With these TV shows, though, there wasn't really too much scandal revolving around them. It was the first kind of, these things happen in teenagers' lives. Specifically with the OC was kind of pushing the barrier that much more against One Tree Hill. One Tree Hill had its moments, but the OC was the one more so for millennials that they considered it more raw, more real, more gritty, but not nearly as gritty as some of these TV shows we have now. But for context, they were still rather tasteful though. We never saw boobs in our face. We never saw full on. We didn't see full on that, but it was there. Teenagers do go through phases. They're literally job and hormonal, so it only makes sense to show that in your TV shows if you want to represent the teenage lifestyle correctly. But like I said, these ones weren't known so much as being scandalous. These were both considered, trashy, but fun, and gave us the gorgeous icons of Adam Brody and Chad Michael Murray. But the main point of these early shows was that it wasn't focused on the sex appeal. It would have those scenes thrown here and there, but it wasn't the focus of these shows. The focus of these shows was more the drama and the relationships between the characters, but not so much for the sexual appeal. And whenever these scenes would come on these shows, it would be edited in a way where you just see the two characters kissing for a bit, and then it would either fade to black or cut to the next scene. There wasn't really that much focus on the actual acts of these characters. It would be insinuated, it would be talked about afterwards, but we don't really get to see it fully as much as we do in the future shows I'm about to talk about. So that's the main key factor to highlight here for these early 2000s shows, is that there was in there, but absolutely not the focus of these shows, and when it was shown, it wasn't even really shown at all. Fast forward 2007, and we then get the iconic, the bombastic, the glorious Gossip Girl 2007. Are you kidding? Are you joking?
You know you love me. XOXO.
This really set teenage television in North America to the next level of scandalous. And you know why? Simply because of their genius guerrilla marketing style. Funny enough, the same man who developed the OC is also the same man who developed Gossip Girl. So we do see a lot of his style and his flavor, especially in the first season of Gossip Girl, really shine through here. And it was huge. If y'all don't know Gossip Girl at this point, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what rock you're living under, but y'all gotta wake up, because Gossip Girl was the phenomenon, and it's still culturally relevant to this day. It really amped up the bar when it came to these sexual scenes. Not only did it have pretty scandalous sexy scenes throughout the series. Specifically, the way they did their marketing was absolutely insane. Absolutely crazy. If y'all aren't aware, they had this whole marketing campaign where they specifically used negative reviews that the show was getting in their marketing campaign to draw that much more intrigue to their teenage audience. There's the examples here: Every Parent's Nightmare, Very Bad for You, Mind-blowingly Inappropriate, A Nasty Piece of Work. Oh, Lord. It was genius. It was absolutely genius. Still images taken directly from the show, displaying the teens doing stuff. Doing some things. But it absolutely works, because I was one of those tweens actually at the time. I was pretty young when this came out. But I was looking at this like, oh, I kind of want to watch that. And it's funny because from the scenes that they directly pull these still images from, they actually aren't even that bad in retrospect. The Very Bad for You one, it's just the guy giving the girl a cherry, and then she just twists it around with her mouth, and then his dad comes in right away. It's not even that sexual, really. Nasty Piece of Work, they just kiss for a little bit at the pool with other people around them. It's not even like it was a private moment. It's literally during a party. And they're making out to music in the background too. It wasn't that sexual, but yet this campaign drew audiences in thinking, oh, this is going to be a horny ass teen show. This one is starting to break the mold and bend the rules that much more as a teenage show. What can we get away with as a teenage show? Adding on to this, while watching the show, and myself as an adult, still being able to enjoy it to this day, there wasn't anything insanely inappropriate, in my humble opinion. But at the time, could have been deemed as insanely inappropriate to parents, of course. But there was never any nudity. There was never any sequences where you just hear the heavy painting or anything like that without music in the background. I always feel like the music makes a difference in making something more PG or not, you know? If you're like hearing the things versus if you're just, I don't know, watching a music video. The scenes were actually rather tasteful, but sexy enough for teenagers, and in my humble opinion, the perfect blend of showing enough sexiness, especially to your teenage audience, but without being exploitative, because yeah, this was a CW show. CW was known for being PG-13, 14A. There was going to be no extremely long love scenes or anything like that in these TV shows, and if there would be some, then it would just be placed with music. No nudity. No nudity.
Very demure, very mindful.
However, when it comes to glamorizing, I do see where people could take issue where it glamorizes, considering how freaking amazing it looked, whereas that's, usually not really the case, especially at that age. So with that, I will give the show a ding, because you shouldn't be flipping your hair like that, Serena.
What names does he call you when you make love? Does he put his hand? Does he?
Wow, how old are you?
That was Gossip Girl. Afterwards, the CW's next prime pivotal moment was the Vampire Diaries. Vampire Diaries came out in 2000. Shit. When the hell were you? Who the hell were you? In 2009. Now, that one was another prime example of being sexy and utilizing that in your campaign, since it is vampires. And, there was that whole vampire teenage craze, which I go over that in another video if you guys want to watch that. But focusing on this was another example of a show where it was similar to Gossip Girl in that way, of not only cultural phenomenon, but also being known for having a appeal to it, and especially with the ships. Good lord, the shipping wars during Vampire Diaries, that's a whole other thing. But it was relatively sexy. But Again, in the similar style of Gossip Girl, making sure that people are not fully nude. This was the style of the CW. And this is when the CW, in my humble opinion, was going through its prime. Its prime! Gossip Girl and Vampire Diaries were huge for teenagers. Now, with these two shows, with Gossip Girl and Vampire Diaries, another key factor to highlight here is how even though these were more scandalous, even though these were starting to push the boundaries more, and the sexual aspect of the show started to get even more highlighted, they were still relevant to the plot. And you would rarely see sexual things just thrown in there. I mean, yes, more so than the earlier shows that I mentioned, but definitely not as much as the current show that I will get to. But in relation to the TV show and the plot, these scenes were featured in there as a contribution to the relationships within the show, which was part of the main draw, especially for teenage girls like myself, was waiting to see that big moment happen between two love interests that were shipping dearly. For the most part, they were thought out and relevant to what was going on in the show. Funny enough, during this time, there was a woman named Dawn. Good old Dawn. Dawn Ostroff was the woman in charge of the CW. Programming, digital initiatives, branding, marketing, you name it. Queen, you queened out. You absolutely ate down during this time. However, and this is where, in my opinion, the downfall of the CW started to happen. Then the CW got a new head in charge in 2011, which was Mark Pedowitz. He replaced Dawn and was then head of entertainment. He was the one focusing on trying to broaden the audience for the CW. Then he launched the Arrowverse. This was just past my time. I don't know. I'm up for a good teenage show. I really am. Like I said, I rewatch Gossip Girl and the Vampire Diaries on occasion. But like, what is the Arrowverse? Was this really what you wanted to do for your teenagers? I guess he said he wanted to broaden the audience, which makes sense in the sense of, yeah, you have a bunch of comic book fans, I guess you're getting with the Arrowverse, but your bread and butter was teenagers. I don't know. I wouldn't fix what ain't broke. It was working. It was working. You had so many teens at your door begging for more. The shift shifted, and then we started to see less and less interest in the CW as time has gone on. Now, how is this relevant? Because Dawn knew exactly what she was doing and how to hook a teenage audience and have them eating crumbs off of her fingertips. She had that touch and damn well knew exactly the right amount of appeal to have in these shows in order to draw the viewer, aka the teens. Whereas Mark didn't know what the he was doing. But because of Dawn, we got this new wave of sexy, romantic teenage shows. With it, in my opinion, having a healthy amount of appeal without being exploitative, without being insanely in your face about it. She knew the balance. Dawn had a magic formula that unfortunately I personally have not seen been replicated ever since. And unfortunately, once we lost her and lost her touch to these TV shows and got Mark, the question begged, what would be the next big thing? Riverdale was probably the only lasting crown high school jewel of the CW at that point. There was still a gap missing here. There was still a hole that needed to be filled within this market. So where do we go to next? Where do we pull the teens now? Which one of the networks is going to be the next big thing to pull in the teenagers? Intro Netflix. Oh yeah. You know that was coming. Netflix has a slew of teenage shows, and I'm not going to falter Netflix for some of these shows that they've put out, such as Never Have I Ever, recently Ginny and Georgia, even though you could argue it's not just teenage for that show. My Life with the Walter Boys, is that what that one's called? I don't know. So I can't fault them entirely for this shift, and I will go into who I think is the prime influence of why teenage shows have started to head in a more nastier direction. But the first show that really really threw it in my face. One that really stood out in breaking the molds and trying to make it that much more sexier. Like, nah, you thought Gossip Girl was something. You thought Vampire Diaries was something. Wait till you see this. And this show was Elite. Elite. Elite is a teenage murder mystery brought to you by Spain. So notice how some of these that I'm about to talk about, they're not specifically made in North America. However, it was brought to North American audiences due to being on the platform of Netflix. Elite came out, and I tried my best to look up what number it was for the top 10s during that time, because I do remember I was there during this time. This is when I was in college, and this was there. Like, this was in the top 10s, and I swear it was at least top 3 at one point, but I'm not sure if it ever reached number 1. I looked it up. I have no information, so if anybody is able to give me that information, that'd be awesome. But as far as I know, this still was its own phenomenon in itself with North American audiences, even though this was from Spain and was told completely in Spanish. Yet, I was watching it, even though I'm Latina. My friends were watching it who are not Latina. I was hearing about it left and right. People were talking about it. It was really big. First season blew up and really highlighted the next level of sexual scenes on these teenage shows. Amped it up that much more. You know how? With boobs.
Boobs.
Even with some of these scenes having music over top of them, you see them fully each other like ponies. It's fully in your face. Had no limits, and it pushed the boundary that much more for me. This was the first time I was introduced to a throuple. A teenage throuple as a main plot point in a TV show, specifically in a teenage TV show. Let me know if that's been in a teenage show before this one, but for me, that was the first time I'd ever seen it in a teen TV show. That was huge. That was also huge. That just goes to show how sexually explorative this one was. This one just absolutely had no apologies for what it was and continued making that part of their TV show, honing in on that much more throughout the years, because if you notice in their marketing campaigns, they're not shying away from it. No, this is actually part of the show. This is the reason you watch the show now, is for those scenes, is for all of those encounters. The first season did a pretty good job with its marketing, and the first couple seasons actually, because the first few seasons were specifically focused on more so this murder mystery aspect, but also obviously people were watching it for the old stuff. But as the years have gone on, the show has now been just known as the show. And yeah, with its marketing style, with the way the commercials are, with the way the posters are, it's just really all it is now. That's the main focus now instead of the murder mystery. It's like, nah, that's there, but this is what you came for. They doubled down on that hard. These scenes were just nasty. You got the full scene drawn out for a long period of time with the painting and and all howling, the how that really broke the barrier there in glamorizing to no avail. However, there was also the UK show Education that came out on Netflix. However, this one I will not fault as much because it's as the title says. Those who have watched it know that the scenes aren't glamorized, even though these teens, who are obviously adult actors, there's a lot showing them naked, but where people are more okay with this and have not condemned it as much because of the fact that it's showing these moments raw and real, more realistically, and again, not so glamorizing, but grounding it to reality, because most of these scenes, if not all of these scenes, are all awkward. They're all awkward as shit, and it's more so to make the audience laugh and relate and saying, yep, I remember when I was a teenage and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I won't fault it too much with this new wave of teenage shows being exploitative because it didn't really feel as exploitative. However, you know which one does? Oh, you know that was coming. You were waiting to get to this. You were waiting to get to this. 2019, we get Euphoria. HBO's Euphoria. And I could sit here talking to you for hours on how nasty Euphoria is, but y'all have already heard it. Y'all have already heard that. The main points I want to put here, though, is how this really, apart from Elite, as Elite, as much as it gained popularity amongst North American audiences, it did not nearly reach the heights of Euphoria. Euphoria is the next big thing. It has been the next big thing. So culturally relevant now and has exploded to such a phenomenon now that this really is the main point of, okay, now we're really getting into teenage shows being this way and potentially this becoming popular and the new normal. Is this going to be the new normal? Because look at how successful this thing has become. Look at the freaking numbers for this show. Overall, yes, as you are probably aware, this was the show that really got people upset and is more controversial than even Elite's, because I was looking at reviews for Elite and most people were just calling it fun trash. Nobody really had issue with it. There wasn't really anybody putting up a stink with that show, but this one, yes. And why it's become so controversial, I believe, is A, because of the popularity, obviously. Also because of how glamorizing it is, because I would argue that it's that much more glamorizing than Elite, even though this isn't the main focus like Elite is, but it glamorizes it in the sense of the way how it's filmed. And you know, it is an artistic choice. I personally think it's pretty with the way Euphoria is filmed. Obviously the cinematography is gorgeous, but there's a lot of sequences where the girls are, specifically Sydney Sweeney, are very sexualized. The way these girls are dressed, the way these girls behave, the way these girls are filmed, it's extremely sexualizing, and we do know how true this came to be because of the popularity of Sydney Sweeney that arose after season 2 of Euphoria. Coincidentally, when she got even more scenes, yes, all of these girls are extremely sexualized in the show, which is very concerning. What are you doing? What are we doing here? This isn't reality. And Sam Levinson argues a lot of what he's written for this show is grounded in reality. But for me, the way that these encounters are depicted, it's more fantasizing for sure. He also shows these sequences like these girls are so empowered and they know what they're doing. But it's like, you don't know what the you're doing. I think that's the best way I can really say. The prime examples being Cassie and the character Kat. Barbie's character Kat has this whole plot line where she webcams for these men, and yet there's no consequences shown to this. And mind you, she's a teenager, so it's like, huh? And when she's exploring her new look and has like a newfound confidence in herself in season 1, she's shown doing these things with these men and being like a powerhouse. Like these are power moves that she's doing, but you're a teenager. You're a teenager. What are we doing here? Empowering this woman teenager and doing these things and, you know, having her be an absolute pro at doing these things.
Seriously, that was like one of the best I've ever had.
What the fuck?
Bruh. Mastering the art of the takes time. Point is with Euphoria, yeah, it just took it to the next level. Okay, this is how much we're showing. You know, there's some sexual scenes and it's implied these things are happening, but we're not showing too much. And then you get Gossip Girl, Vampire Diaries era, where it's the way that these are filmed is more sexy and more interesting, but again, not too much, and glamorizing. Still not quite there. And then Euphoria was like, fuck it, we're gonna show these guys like no tomorrow, like absolute porn star. The influence that Euphoria now has is interesting to me because specifically with HBO and HBO Max, because fast forward, we then get the new Gossip Girl 2021. And with the new Gossip Girl, funny enough in comparison, it was way more sexual than original Gossip Girl and way more exploitative than original Gossip Girl. Thankfully, from what I was shown, they don't really show nudity. I mean, there is a couple ass cheek scenes, but the scenes were definitely way more sexual than original Gossip Girl. And then funny enough, again, with the throuple in Elite, we also get a focus on a throuple in this high school. And also would love to hear your guys' thoughts on throuples in teenage shows. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence with it where I'm like, does that actually happen with teenagers? And is it more of a nuanced thing where as an adult, maybe you're more mature to make that decision of having a throuple? Again, I don't know. I'm just asking what you guys think about it. But for me, throwing the throuple in there has so far been a sign of treating these teenage shows as more mature than what they are as teenagers. But again, let me know your thoughts on it because I'm not a teenager and I don't have any teenagers in my life. Gossip Girl happened, and also it was similar in Euphoria in the sense of being more provocative and that much more than your average teenage show. And it's curious because this did come from HBO as well, so it makes me question if HBO is going to continue that type of style in being a little more exploitative in their teenage shows, if they're gonna do more of those teenage shows and have them having more sexual scenes and pushing the boundary that much more. I don't even know how much more you can push it with Euphoria's case. There's nowhere you can really go from here except less. Where all of this originated from, though, funny enough, you could argue Euphoria is to blame now for the new wave of teenage shows and how it is and how it feels more forced putting these in there and just unnecessary, just absolutely unnecessary, because you had it good with these CW ones. They had a really good example of what is sexy, arguably glamorizing, but for a teenager, that's probably enough. These shows are probably enough for them to see that type of thing. They were more subtle and they were more tasteful. Whereas these ones are more trashy, in your face, and forced.
You're a virgin.
I don't understand why, because of that UCLA study. I did mention it before in another video I did, but basically there was a UCLA study that took place in 2023 where 47.5% of respondents ages 13 to 24 that said that they feel most TV shows and movie plots don't need sexual content. And 51.5% of them said that they want to see more focus on friendships and platonic relationships. It just goes to show that there are a lot of teenagers out there that are like, we don't need all of that. It's just a curious thing, though, because even though they say that, Euphoria ended up being one of the most popular shows of the year. But the one that I have to mention that I humbly believe was the pillar, was the inspiration, and has been quoted to being inspiration for a lot of these shows is Skins UK. Of course. The reason I say this is because if you do blame Euphoria, who was responsible for bringing it over to North America specifically, you could argue Skins UK. Skins UK came out at the same time, around the same time as Gossip Girl. All the way back in 2007, the show came out and was groundbreaking with the way teenage life was depicted in this show. If y'all don't know, this show had absolutely no boundaries, absolutely no limits. You name it, this show did not shy away from it. And this was all happening to teenagers. Oh, they had it all. And this was the one that really influenced other shows to be more raw, to be more real, not being afraid and showing the subject matter. It did have critical success. It was considered revolutionary, has a cult following to it. The reason why I say that this had more influence on North American teenage television is because it was quoted that apparently while Sam Levinson was developing Euphoria, he met with an HBO executive. They wanted to develop Euphoria, which is based on the Israeli TV show Euphoria of the same name. That show, the Israeli Euphoria, was then also quoted to taking inspiration from 2007's Skins. So you see how this all connects, okay? Skins UK was the influence for this Israeli show Euphoria, which was then the inspiration for Sam Levinson's Euphoria. You could argue that Skins UK was the pivotal TV show in influencing these North American TV shows and where we're going with teenage North American TV shows. The main difference, and I would like to do a more in-depth Euphoria versus Skins analysis, but we're talking about this right now. Main difference is that while Euphoria glamorizes these sexual encounters incredibly so, Skins UK didn't as much. Meaning the way that it was filmed, the way it was shot, the way these sequences go, it's not as glamorizing, but I do understand why some people would probably argue and have issue with these scenes because, yes, in certain seasons it is more tasteful, and although it is quite sexual, definitely more sexual than Gossip Girl or Vampire Diaries, it still is tasteful in the sense where, yeah, like you don't see them fully nude. It won't draw out for too long a period of time, and they will have music playing. But it definitely didn't shy away for some of their sequences. Goodness gracious. I rewatched series 2, and some of those scenes, I'm like, how the f did they get away with that? Like, honestly, pretty insane. Creators Brian Elsley and Jamie Britton, they really wanted to showcase the reality of teenagehood, and yes, while some of the scenes were pretty sexual, they did show consequences for a lot of their actions, and that was one of the things that they did want to highlight, is that they feel like these teenage shows show these things happening but then no consequences happening. So that was, I think, the main difference between Skins and Euphoria, even though you could argue with some of the things, yeah, there's some consequences, but the way Skins did it was just better. But yeah, it really stood as a pillar of inspiration to a lot of these teenage shows. The way these teenage shows are unapologetic and becoming more grittier. Let me know your thoughts on which show you personally think paved the way. Let me know if you think it's Elite. Let me know if you think it's Skins. Or maybe you think, yeah, it's just Euphoria. Let me know if you also don't like the way this is going. I mean, I personally feel like, yes, less is more. You don't need to be showing that much boob in my face. Who is this for? You have these high schoolers in this high school setting, so you would imagine it's for teenagers, but yet... who's watching it? Are teenagers watching it? Are they taking inspo from these scenes? Are they really feeling represented with the way you're depicting them in these shows? I don't know. I personally appreciated where it was more of the Gossip Girl Vampire Diaries era, because it's just not needed. Gossip Girl and Vampire Diaries and Pretty Little Liars stood the test of time in showcasing, hey, you can have a teenage show that's bomb, that people love, that stands the test of time, that people to that age, my age would watch and rewatch without showing all that. This is what we can do and can prove to be successful amongst teenagers, be culturally relevant without being exploitative. Euphoria's success is pretty concerning. That, yeah, maybe this is the way that teenage shows are going to go now. Maybe they're going to start being like, yeah, look at how great Euphoria was. I am pro going back to just being fun trash, like Gossip Girl and Vampire Diaries, and being sexy without being exploitative. That's my humble take. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time. Mwah.